And Steny Hoyer, he is the House Minority Whip. Congressman, thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Becky. Good to be with you.
We've been hearing reports about what might be in this new legislation, and so far, at least from what we've heard, it sounds like it's maybe a gentler version of the House bill. A lot of the things are the same, but maybe some of these wind downs for the expansion, or the ramp up for Medicaid is kind of stretched out over a longer period of time. Have you heard anything different? Do you have any additional insights?
I've heard what you've heard. I don't know that I would characterize it as gentler. It apparently is stretched out. Frankly, my presumption is politically they felt the further you stretch it out, the less immediate political adverse consequences it will have. Only about 35% of Americans support the House bill. This is in some ways deeper cuts in Medicaid, deeper cuts for tax cuts for the wealthy coming down the line. We're still probably going to see 23 or 24 million people cut off from health care insurance. We don't have any score from CBO yet. This has all been done in secret. I haven't seen the bill. Senator Johnson was, a Republican from Wisconsin, was on television this morning saying he hasn't seen the bill. So that he has concerns about it and wants his constituents to review it. That's a reasonable request. We had a lot of hearings, and we were very criticized over a year-and-a-half consideration of the Affordable Care Act. Now they've run it through secretly both in the House and in the Senate. No hearings, no committees, markups, no opportunities for amendments. So it's a process that's terrible. But more importantly, I think the product is going to be perceived by the public as terrible and harmful to them and to their families and to their opportunities to get affordable quality health care.
You mentioned Senator Johnson, a Republican, has already issued his concerns with how the whole thing has taken place at this point.
Yes.
Is it fair to assume that this bill, regardless of what's in it, since we haven't actually seen it, it's hard to imagine it will get a single Democratic vote?
I think that's accurate. I don't think either in the Senate or the House, but we'll see whether it gets to the Senate, because there are at least 7 or 8 Republicans who have expressed serious reservations. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Senator McConnell can get them to rationalize what they think is a bad process, and frankly, many of them think it's a bad bill, to vote for it.
Having said that, the Republicans are under some pressure to deliver. This has been a campaign promise. It's something they've been running on for a long time. That's ultimately why we saw a bill that did pass the House.
I think that's right, Becky.
Brought to bear.
Yeah.
They want to make some changes.
I think you're correct on that. It's sad that what we had was a lot of rhetoric for 6 or 7 years about repealing the Affordable Care Act. And when we got to actually having a Republican majority so that they could do it, they had no alternative. They had no alternative that had a consensus. They had no alternative that did what the President of the United States, Donald Trump, said during the campaign he wanted to do, and still says he wants to do, make sure everybody has insurance at lower cost and better quality. The House bill certainly didn't do that. CBO pointed out that 24 million people lost their insurance, and the Senate bill clearly is not going to do that. So they simply had no alternative, and they're scrambling around to get something that looks like they're meeting their political promise. It will not.
Although, Congressman, I have to say, this is where Washington probably falls out of step with most of America, who is looking at this. And you guys can complain about the process or how things get to this position, but health care is pretty complicated. We have not seen the two sides of the aisle work together. There's got to be some common sense ground that that would be a sensible solution, something that
Becky,
people could agree with.
I think that's accurate. There needs to be bipartisan compromise and working together. We can make the Affordable Care Act work much better. We Democrats have said that continuously. And frankly, when you look at the two processes, I understand the Americans are not focused on process. They're correctly focused on product and policy and what affects them and their families. That's what they ought to be focused on. But the fact is, in the Affordable Care Act, Senator Baucus worked very closely with Senator Grassley for months to see whether Senator Grassley would participate. We had hearings. We had committee markups. Republicans were able to offer amendments in committee in the House of Representatives, so there was a bipartisan process. It was simply that the Republicans refused to participate.
Now, maybe I guess it's just the two views of
yes.
how you go about tackling this, what the end result is, and two views.
Well, we're
two views is making it simple because there are many different views within each of the parties. But
no doubt about
the idea that you can find one direction and convince the other side to sign off on it may be too much to ask. Again, it seems like there are real fixes, real solutions there, but it also seems that each side has diametrically opposed positions on how they think this process should take place. Well,
Becky, but I think you can say that, and I think certainly there are strong views on both sides of this question. But the President of the United States, if he sends down a bill that does what he says he wants to do, that is, everybody has insurance, lower cost, better quality. I've said he sends that kind of bill down, and I think that he accomplishes those objectives, I'm going to be for it. He hasn't done that, of course. The Republicans haven't put anything on the floor. Yes, we ought to work on a bipartisan basis. We think the ACA was not a perfect bill. It needs to be fixed. Obviously, small businesses, the small market itself is too expensive for people. We can fix that if we work together to do it. But we're not going to destroy Americans' ability to have affordable quality health care in the process. That's when CBO says 24 million people are going to be knocked off their insurance under the House bill. And the President of the United States says...
24 people leaving, yeah, 24 people leaving, some of them choosing to leave, some losing.
Well, some of them not getting it, not leaving. They're not on it right now. Every time those are future ads that wouldn't happen.
No, that's not true. That's 24 million people who now have insurance, or would have insurance by 10 years from now, would lose that ability to get insurance. That's what the CBO said. Not people who have it.
But a lot of it because they don't, there's no longer a mandate, so they don't stay in the program.
Well, but you say there's no longer a mandate. What happens when you lose the mandate and people drop out of the market? What you have is much more expensive premiums, or premiums go down.
Pretty expensive
pre-existing conditions kick in, as you know, and no community rating, so that a lot of people won't be able to get insurance. That's what CBO.
I hate to cut you off, sir. We have some breaking news, but we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Check out American Airlines. News that's pushing up the shares in ALL. And an SEC filing, American says it received notice from Qatar Airways, and that carrier has an intention to acquire at least a 10% stake in American.